The stagecoach lurched over another rut in the dusty trail, and Margaret Mitchell pressed her hand against the window frame to steady herself, watching the Arizona desert stretch endlessly before her. She was 24 years old and dying, though no one on this coach knew it yet. The doctor back in Philadelphia had given her 6 months, maybe a year if she was lucky, and told her the dry air of the Southwest might ease the consumption that rattled in her chest with every breath. What he hadn't told her was how to face death alone, unmarried, unloved, thousands of miles from anyone who might remember her name once she was gone. The year was 1878, and Tucson was still more dust than civilization when the coach finally rolled to a stop outside the depot. Sarah climbed down carefully, holding her carpetbag close, and tried not to cough. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel sweat trickling down her back beneath her traveling dress. She had enough money for maybe 3 months of room and board, and after that, well, it wouldn't matter much anyway. "You need help, miss." The driver was already unloading luggage, barely glancing her way. "No, thank you, I can manage." Her voice sounded stronger than she felt, which was something at least. She had been managing on her own for 3 years now, ever since her parents died in the fire that took their dry goods store. No siblings, no suitors who had stayed around once they learned she had nothing to offer, no future to speak of. Just this desperate gamble that maybe the warm, dry air would give her a little more time. The boarding house the doctor had recommended stood at the edge of town, a squat adobe building that looked like it had been there since the Spanish first came through. The woman who answered Sarah's knock was round and weathered, with kind eyes that took in Sarah's pale face and thin frame in one sweeping glance. "You must be Miss Mitchell. Dr. Brennan sent word you were coming. I'm Mrs. Rosa Delgado. Come in out of this heat." The room was small but clean, with a window that looked out toward the mountains rising in the distance. Sarah set down her bag and tried to smile. "It's perfect, thank you. You look like you need rest. I'll bring you some water and something light to eat. Dinner is at 6, but don't feel you must come down if you're too tired." Sarah did rest, though sleep was elusive. She lay on the narrow bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of this desert town. Horses in the street, voices in Spanish and English, the distant bark of a dog. She wondered how long it would take before she was just another body in the cemetery on the hill, unmourned and forgotten, but the days passed and something strange happened. The air did seem to help. She could breathe a little easier, walk a little farther before exhaustion claimed her. Mrs. Delgado fed her nourishing soups and fresh bread, and slowly, very slowly, Sarah began to feel something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly, but perhaps not quite despair either. She took to walking in the early mornings before the heat became oppressive. Just short distances at first, around the block, then a little farther. Tucson was rough and raw, full of cowboys and miners, gamblers and merchants, all trying to carve out their piece of the territory. Sarah kept to herself, speaking politely when spoken to but never lingering. What was the point of making friends when she would only leave them grieving? It was on one of these morning walks, nearly 3 weeks after her arrival, that she first saw him. She had ventured farther than usual, drawn by the sight of those distant mountains. The path led out of town proper, past the last scattered buildings and into the open desert where saguaro cacti stood like sentinels. She knew she should turn back, but the morning was cool and clear, and she felt better than she had in ages. Just a little farther, she told herself. Just to the top of that rise. She didn't see the rattlesnake until it was coiling to strike, its warning rattle freezing her in place. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the serpent, knowing she couldn't move fast enough, knowing this might be how it ended after all. Not slowly in a sick but here. Alone in the desert. The knife flew past her skirt so close she felt the air move, pinning the snake's head to the ground before it could strike. Sarah stumbled backward, gasping, and looked up to see a man striding toward her from the rocks where he must have been watching. He was tall, broader across the shoulders than any man she had ever seen, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a beard that couldn't quite hide the strong lines of his face. His clothes were buckskin and worn cotton, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in this harsh landscape. He retrieved his knife, dispatched the snake with quick efficiency, and then turned to look at her. His eyes were startlingly blue against his sun-bronzed skin, and they studied her with an intensity that made her flush. "You should not be out here alone, miss. This is not Philadelphia." His voice was deep and rough, with an accent she couldn't quite place. European, perhaps, something northern. Sarah lifted her chin, still shaking from the close call but determined not to show it. "How did you know I was from Philadelphia?" Mrs. Delgado mentioned a sick Eastern girl staying with her. There are not so many newcomers to Tucson that word does not spread. He wiped his knife on his pants and sheathed it. "I am Nicholas Fletcher. I live in the mountains. Sarah Mitchell, and I'm not a girl. I'm 24 years old." Something that might have been amusement flickered in those blue eyes. "My apologies." "You should still not be out here alone, Miss Mitchell. These mountains are dangerous for those who do not know them. I was just walking. I didn't mean to go so far." She could feel her strength ebbing, the shock and exertion catching up with her. The morning suddenly seemed too bright, the ground unsteady beneath her feet. Nicholas Fletcher moved quickly for such a large man, catching her elbow as she swayed. "When did you last eat?" "I had breakfast." "That is not what I asked." He studied her face, and she saw understanding dawn in his expression. "You are the one with consumption. They sent you here to die more comfortably." The blunt words should have hurt, but instead Sarah felt an odd relief. No polite dancing around the truth, no pitying looks. Just fact. "Yes. Though I seem to be taking my time about it. The desert air helps some people. It helped my mother." He was still holding her elbow, and now he gestured back toward town. "Come. I will walk you back before you collapse out here and make more trouble for yourself." Sarah wanted to argue, to insist she was fine, but she wasn't fine and they both knew it. She let him guide her back down the path, measuring her steps carefully, trying not to lean on him too much. They walked in silence for a while, and she found herself stealing glances at her unexpected rescuer. He had to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with the kind of solid, weathered strength that came from years of hard living. There was something about him that suggested solitude, as if he had spent so much time alone in the wilderness that civilization sat uncomfortably on his shoulders. "What do you do in the mountains?" she asked finally, needing to break the silence. "I trap, hunt. Sometimes I scout for the army when they need someone who knows the Apache trails." He glanced down at her. "It is a solitary life. That must be peaceful, lonely." "They are often the same thing." They had reached the edge of town now, and he slowed his pace even more. "You understand this, I think." Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes, I understand that very well." They stopped in front of Mrs. Delgado's boarding house, and Nicholas released her elbow. Sarah felt the loss of his steadying presence immediately, though she remained upright through sheer will. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Fletcher." "Nicholas, and you are welcome." He seemed about to say something else, then thought better of it. Instead, he touched the brim of his hat and turned to go. Sarah watched him walk away, this strange mountain man who had appeared out of nowhere to save her from a rattlesnake strike. She wondered if she would ever see him again, then wondered why it mattered. She was dying. Whatever happened next, it would all be over soon enough, but something had shifted in that brief encounter. For the first time since her diagnosis, Sarah felt seen. Not pitied, not dismissed, but truly seen by another human being. It was a dangerous feeling for someone who had resigned herself to dying alone. Mrs. Delgado was full of questions when Sarah came inside, pale and trembling. "You met Nicholas Fletcher. That man comes to town maybe 3 or 4 times a year, keeps to himself up in those mountains. People say he came west after some tragedy back in Norway, but he never speaks of it." The older woman helped Sarah to a chair and brought her water. "He is a good man, though, honorable. The Apache respect him because he respects their ways. He seemed very capable." Sarah sipped the water slowly, letting it cool her parched throat. "Capable, yes. Also very much alone, like someone else I know." Mrs. Delgado's eyes were knowing. "Sometimes God puts people in each other's paths for a reason, Mija." Sarah wanted to argue that God had abandoned her long ago, that there was no divine plan in any of this, but she was too tired. She let Mrs. Delgado help her to her room, where she slept away the rest of the morning and into the afternoon. She dreamed of blue eyes and strong hands, of mountains she had never climbed and futures she would never see. 3 days passed. Sarah returned to her careful routine, keeping her walks shorter and closer to town. She told herself she was being sensible, not that she was disappointed by the absence of a certain mountain man. It shouldn't matter. It didn't matter. She was here to die in relative comfort, not to develop foolish attachments. On the 4th day, she found him waiting outside the boarding house at dawn. Nicholas stood in the long shadows, holding the reins of 2 horses. He looked up when she emerged, and there was something almost hesitant in his expression. "I thought you might like to see the desert properly. If you are strong enough for a short ride." Sarah's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I haven't ridden in years. This mare is gentle. We will go slowly and not far, but there are things worth seeing if you wish to see them." She should say no. She should stay safe and sensible and not risk her limited strength on foolish adventures. But when had safety ever given her anything but loneliness? "I would like that very much." Nicholas helped her mount, his hands careful at her waist, and then swung easily onto his own horse. They rode out of town as the sun was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Sarah felt something in her chest loosen. Not the sickness, that was still there, but the tight knot of resignation that had lived beneath her breastbone for so long. He took her to a small canyon where water trickled between rocks, creating an oasis of green in the brown landscape. Cottonwood trees provided shade, and birds sang in their branches. It was impossibly beautiful, impossibly alive. "I come here sometimes when town becomes too much," Nicholas said, dismounting and then helping her down. "It reminds me that even in harsh places, life finds a way." They sat by the water, and Sarah asked him about Norway, about what had brought him here. He was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak in that low, rough voice. "I had a wife, Anna. We were young, barely 20, and very much in love. She died giving birth to our son. He died too 3 days later. I could not stay there where everything reminded me of them. So I came here as far from home as I could get, and I tried to forget." Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry. It was 8 years ago now. The pain is not so sharp anymore, but the loneliness remains." He looked at her directly. "I think you understand this kind of loneliness. The kind that comes from loss." "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "My parents died 3 years ago. There was no one else, and now there's this." She gestured vaguely at herself, at the sickness inside her. "The doctor said 6 months to a year. That was 2 months ago. Yet here you are. Still breathing, still walking, still alive. For now. For now is all any of us have, Sarah. Tomorrow is promised to no one sick or healthy. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, and Sarah felt something spark at the contact. I have lived alone in those mountains for 8 years because I was afraid to feel anything again, afraid that if I let someone in, I would lose them just like I lost Anna and our son. But when I saw you about to be struck by that snake, I realized something. Fear of loss is just another kind of death. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, feeling the solid reality of his touch. I didn't come here looking for this. I came here to die quietly without burdening anyone. And I did not come down from the mountains looking for this either. But here we are. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I would like to spend time with you, Sarah, however much time there is. I would like to show you the beauty of this desert, to hear you laugh, to know you. If you will allow it. It was madness. It was the opposite of everything she had planned. She was supposed to fade away quietly, not let this mountain man with sad eyes and gentle hands into her carefully guarded heart. But sitting there by the trickling water, with the sun warming her face and his hand holding hers, Sarah found she didn't want to be sensible anymore. I would like that too, very much. The smile that crossed Nicholas's face transformed it completely, chasing away the shadows and revealing the man he must have been before grief claimed him. Good. Then we should start with breakfast. I brought supplies. He had indeed brought supplies. Bread and cheese, dried meat and fresh fruit that must have cost a small fortune in Tucson. They ate sitting on smooth rocks by the water, and Sarah couldn't remember the last time food had tasted so good. Nicholas told her about the mountains, about tracking animals and reading weather in the clouds, about the Apache families who had taught him to move silently through the wilderness. She told him about Philadelphia, about her parents' store, about the books she loved to read and the places she had dreamed of seeing. I always wanted to travel, she admitted. Paris, London, Rome, all those grand cities full of art and history. Instead, I came to the Arizona desert to die. The desert has its own kind of beauty, its own history. The Apache say these mountains are sacred, full of spirits and power. Nicholas leaned back against a rock, his long legs stretched out before him. Maybe there is a reason you came here. Maybe it was not just to die. What else could it be? Maybe it was to live first, really live for whatever time you have. He met her eyes. Maybe it was to meet a stubborn Norwegian who needed to remember how to feel alive again. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. That's a very romantic notion, Mr. Fletcher, Nicholas, and why should it not be romantic? Life is short and often brutal. We should take beauty where we find it. He stood and offered his hand. Come, there is something else I want to show you if you are not too tired. She wasn't tired, or rather she was but didn't care. She took his hand and let him lead her deeper into the canyon, where ancient petroglyphs decorated the rock walls. Spirals and handprints, figures of animals and hunters, all left by people long gone but not forgotten. They were here hundreds of years ago, Nicholas said softly, his hand still holding hers. They lived and loved and died, and they left these marks to say we existed, we mattered, we were here. Is that not what we all want, to matter to someone, even if just for a little while? Yes, Sarah whispered, staring at those ancient handprints. Yes, that's exactly what we all want. They stood there together in the quiet canyon, and Sarah felt something shift deep inside her. A wall she had built around her heart, brick by brick, beginning to crumble. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was everything she had thought she would never feel again. Nicholas brought her back to town before the heat of the day became too intense, helping her dismount in front of the boarding house with the same careful gentleness he had shown all morning. Mrs. Delgado was watching from the window, and Sarah could practically feel her knowing smile from there. "When can I see you again?" The words tumbled out before Sarah could stop them, and she immediately felt foolish. Too eager, too desperate, but Nicholas just smiled. "Tomorrow, if you wish. I need to bring some pelts to the trader, but after that, I am free. We could have dinner together if Mrs. Delgado would permit a guest at her table. I will ask her." "Good." He hesitated, then reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering briefly on her cheek. "I am glad the rattlesnake brought us together, Sarah Mitchell, even if it did scare years off my life." "I'm glad too," she managed, her skin tingling where he had touched her. She watched him ride away, leading the mare behind his own horse, and pressed her hand to her chest. Her heart was racing, her breath coming fast, and for once it wasn't because of the consumption. It was because of him. This unexpected man who had appeared in her life just when she had given up on living. Mrs. Delgado was, of course, delighted to host Nicholas for dinner. She spent the entire next day cooking, humming to herself while Sarah tried to help and mostly just got in the way. The older woman kept shooting her knowing looks that made Sarah flush. "I can see it already," Mrs. Delgado finally said, stirring a pot of her famous pozole. "The way you look when you speak of him, the way your face lights up, and him, yesterday morning, standing outside like a nervous boy waiting for his sweetheart. My old heart is happy to see it." "It's foolish," Sarah protested weakly. "I'm dying, Rosa. What kind of future could we possibly have?" "Who knows what the future holds? You are still here, are you not? Still breathing, still growing stronger every day I see you. Maybe this is what you needed. A reason to fight, a reason to live." Mrs. Delgado took Sarah's hands in her flour-dusted ones. "Do not turn away from happiness because you are afraid it will not last, Mija. Nothing lasts forever. That is why we must grab it with both hands while we can." Sarah thought about those words all afternoon as she bathed and dressed in her best gown, a deep blue silk that had been her mother's. It was too fancy for a simple dinner in a boarding house, but she wanted Nicholas to see her as more than just the pale, sickly woman he had rescued. She wanted him to see her as beautiful, even if just for one evening. When he arrived, freshly shaved and wearing clean clothes, the look in his eyes told her he did see her that way. He stood in the doorway of the dining room, and something passed between them that needed no words. "You are lovely," he said simply, and Sarah felt beautiful for the first time in years. Dinner was perfect. Mrs. Delgado had outdone herself, and the food was rich and delicious. They talked and laughed, and Sarah found herself telling stories she hadn't thought of in years. Stories about her childhood, about her parents, about the dreams she had put away when reality became too harsh. Nicholas listened to everything, asking questions, genuinely interested in every detail of her life. He told her more about Norway too, about growing up in a small fishing village, about the long dark winters and the brief bright summers. About Anna, and how they had promised to grow old together, never knowing how short their time would be. "You still love her?" Sarah asked quietly when Mrs. Delgado had excused herself to prepare coffee. "I will always love her. She was my first love, the mother of my child, but she is gone, and I am still here. For a long time I felt guilty about that, guilty that I survived when they did not, guilty whenever I felt even a moment of happiness." He reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "But I think Anna would be angry with me for wasting the life she lost. She would want me to live fully, to love again if I found someone worth loving." "And have you?" Sarah's heart was pounding. "Found someone worth loving?" "Yes." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I think perhaps I have." The air between them felt charged with possibility, with the weight of everything unspoken. Sarah wanted to lean across the table and kiss him, wanted to feel his arms around her, wanted things she had thought she would never want again. But Mrs. Delgado returned with coffee, and the moment passed into something gentler, sweeter. They moved to the small sitting room, and Nicholas told her about his plans for the coming weeks. There was a valley high in the mountains, he said, where wildflowers bloomed even in the heat of summer. He wanted to take her there, if she felt strong enough for the journey. It would mean being away from town for several days. We would camp, and I would take care of everything. You would only need to rest and breathe the mountain air and let the beauty of that place work its magic. He was sitting close to her on the settee, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. But only if you wish to go. I do not want to push you beyond your strength. Sarah thought about it. The old Sarah, the one who had come to Tucson to die, would have said no. Too risky, too improper, too much. But that Sarah was fading away, replaced by someone braver, someone who wanted to seize whatever happiness she could find. Yes, she said, I want to go. His smile was brilliant. Then we will leave in 3 days. That gives you time to prepare, and me time to gather everything we will need. Those 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Sarah had never been camping, had never spent a night under the stars, and the prospect was both terrifying and thrilling. Mrs. Delgado helped her assemble appropriate clothing and supplies, all while offering unsolicited advice about mountain men and matters of the heart. He is a good man, that Nicholas Fletcher, she said, folding a warm shawl into Sarah's bag. Lonely, but good. You are good for each other, I think. Both of you have been alone too long. I'm scared, Rosa, Sarah admitted. Not of the journey, but of this, of caring about him. What if the consumption gets worse? What if I die and leave him grieving again? What if you live? Mrs. Delgado countered. What if this mountain air and this man's love are exactly what you need to heal? Miracles happen, Mija. I have seen them with my own eyes. Do not give up before you have even tried. On the morning they were to leave, Sarah woke before dawn, her heart fluttering with nerves and excitement. She dressed carefully, putting on the split riding skirt Mrs. Delgado had helped her make, and went downstairs to find Nicholas already waiting with 2 horses laden with supplies. Ready? He asked, and the warmth in his eyes steadied her. Ready. They rode out of Tucson as the sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Nicholas set an easy pace, stopping frequently to let Sarah rest and drink water. He pointed out plants and animals, teaching her the Apache names for things, telling her stories about the land. As they climbed into the mountains, the air grew cooler and easier to breathe. Pine trees replaced cacti, and Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Each breath came a little easier, each step felt a little stronger. Maybe it was the altitude, or maybe it was the company, but she felt more alive than she had in months. They stopped for lunch beside a stream that tumbled down over smooth rocks, the sound of it musical and soothing. Nicholas spread a blanket in the shade and unpacked bread and cheese, dried apples and smoked meat. Sarah ate hungrily, surprised by her own appetite. You have more color in your face, Nicholas observed, studying her with those keen blue eyes. The mountains agree with you. Everything agrees with me lately. Sarah met his gaze, or perhaps it's just the present company. He moved closer on the blanket and Sarah's breath caught. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lifted his hand to cup her cheek. His palm was rough and warm, and Sarah leaned into the touch instinctively. Sarah, he said softly, I must tell you something. I did not bring you up here only to show you wildflowers, though there are wildflowers and they are beautiful. I brought you here because I needed to be away from the world, away from everything, so I could tell you what is in my heart. Then tell me. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. I am falling in love with you. Perhaps I have been falling since that first morning when you stood your ground against that snake, so brave and so fragile all at once. I know we have not known each other long. I know you are sick, and I know you came here believing you would die. But Sarah, I see you getting stronger every day. I see life coming back into your eyes, and I want to be part of that life for however long we have. A week, a month, a year, 50 years. I want all of it. Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were something else entirely, something she couldn't quite name. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me. I thought I had made peace with dying alone. I thought it would be easier that way, not leaving anyone behind to grieve. But Nicholas, I don't want to die alone anymore. I want to live. I want to fight this sickness with everything I have. I want to have a life with you however much time we're given. Then we will fight it together." He leaned forward and kissed her, soft and gentle, a promise more than a passion. Sarah kissed him back, tasting hope and coffee and something indefinably sweet. His beard was soft against her face, his lips warm, and she felt something spark to life inside her chest. Not the consumption, but something bright and vital and wholly good. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. "I have been dead inside for 8 years, Sarah Mitchell. You have brought me back to life. For that alone I would love you, but it is not just that. It is your strength, your courage, the way you face the world even when the world has been cruel to you. You are extraordinary. I'm just a dying shopkeeper's daughter from Philadelphia. No, you are the woman I intend to marry if you will have me. Not today, not tomorrow, but when you are ready. When you are strong enough to stand beside me and make those vows knowing you have a future to share with me." Sarah pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or pity. She found neither. Only love, clear and true and utterly certain. "Ask me again when we reach those wildflowers," she said. "Ask me again when I can answer you standing in the beauty of that valley with my whole heart and all my strength." "Then we had better keep moving," Nicholas said with a smile. "Because I am very eager to ask that question." They rode on through the afternoon, climbing higher into the mountains. The air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and something wild. Sarah's lungs, which had labored with every breath back in Philadelphia, seemed to expand and fill with ease. She couldn't remember the last time breathing hadn't hurt. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, they came around a bend in the trail and Sarah gasped. Before them spread a valley cupped between 2 mountain peaks, and it was filled with wildflowers. Lupines in purple waves, Indian paintbrush in brilliant orange and red, white daisies like scattered stars. It was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. "We will camp here," Nicholas said, his voice soft with wonder. "This is the place I wanted to show you." He helped her down from her horse, and they stood together at the edge of that flowering valley, watching the last rays of sun turn everything golden. Sarah felt something shift inside her, something fundamental and profound. Standing here in this impossible beauty, with this man who had somehow found her when she had given up on being found, she understood what Mrs. Delgado had meant. This was why she had come to Arizona. Not to die, but to discover that she still wanted to live. Nicholas set up camp with practiced efficiency, pitching a sturdy tent and building a fire ring. Sarah helped where she could, gathering kindling and arranging their supplies. It felt natural, working alongside him, as if they had been doing this together for years rather than days. They ate dinner as the stars came out, more stars than Sarah had ever seen in her life. The Milky Way spilled across the sky like diamonds on black velvet, and she lay back on her bedroll to stare up at it in wonder. "In Norway, we have different stars," Nicholas said, lying down beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. But I prefer these. They feel like promise, like possibility. Tell me more about Norway, Sarah said. About your life before. So he did. He told her about fishing with his father in the cold northern seas, about his mother's warm kitchen, and the songs she used to sing. About meeting Anna at a midsummer festival, how they had danced until dawn and known, both of them, that they had found something rare and precious. About the joy when Anna told him she was pregnant and the horror of losing them both. I blamed God for a long time, he said quietly. Blamed him for taking them, for leaving me alive when I wanted to die too. I came to these mountains planning to lose myself, maybe to die fighting the Apache or hunting grizzly bears. I did not care. But the Apache did not want to fight me, and the bears left me alone, and somehow I survived. Year after year I survived. And now, Sarah asked. Now I am grateful I survived, because it led me to you. He turned his head to look at her, his profile sharp against the firelight. Do you believe in fate, Sarah? In the idea that some things are meant to be? I didn't used to. But lying here under these stars, after everything that has happened, I think maybe I do. Maybe we were meant to find each other. Maybe all the pain and loss we have both suffered was leading us to this moment. Then the pain was worth it. I would suffer it all again if it meant finding you at the end. They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams, fears and hopes. Nicholas told her about his plans to build a real cabin in the mountains, something permanent and sturdy. Sarah told him about her love of books, how she had always dreamed of having a library of her own. They talked about children carefully, both of them aware of the ghosts that haunted that conversation. Nicholas's lost son, Sarah's uncertain future. If we could, Sarah said softly, I would want children. I know that might not be possible with my health. But if we could, I would want to fill a house with love and laughter, all the things I never had growing up as an only child. Then we will hope, Nicholas said. And we will see what God grants us. But Sarah, even if it is just the two of us, that would be enough. You would be enough. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both. Nicholas gave Sarah the tent while he rolled up in blankets by the fire, despite her protests. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the mountain night, feeling safer than she had felt in years. Because she knew he was out there, watching over her, and tomorrow they would wake up in this valley of flowers and face another day together. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee brewing over the fire. Sarah emerged from the tent to find Nicholas already up, cooking bacon in a skillet and looking utterly at home in the wilderness. He smiled when he saw her, and Sarah's heart did that complicated flutter it had been doing more and more lately. Good morning, he said. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, maybe years. She accepted the coffee he poured for her and sat on a log near the fire. What's the plan for today? Today, I thought we might explore the valley. There is a hot spring on the far side, hidden in the rocks. The Apache say it has healing properties. He flipped the bacon expertly. And then, if you are willing, I would like to ask you a certain question. Sarah's pulse quickened. I am willing. They spent the morning wandering through the wildflowers, and Nicholas taught her the names of plants and showed her animal tracks in the soft earth. A family of deer watched them from a distance, unafraid. An eagle soared overhead, riding the thermal currents. Sarah felt like she had stepped into an enchanted world, far removed from sickness and death, and all the harsh realities she had been living with. The hot spring was everything Nicholas had promised, a pool of clear, steaming water surrounded by smooth rocks and ferns. Sarah had brought clothes suitable for bathing, and Nicholas discreetly turned away while she changed and slipped into the water. It was heaven. The heat soaked into her bones, easing aches she hadn't even known she was carrying. She closed her eyes and let herself float, Let the water hold her. Let everything else fall away. When she opened her eyes again, Nicholas was sitting on a nearby rock, his back still turned, keeping watch. "You can look," she called. "I'm decent." He turned, and the expression on his face took her breath away. He looked at her like she was something precious, something miraculous, like she was everything. "The water is helping?" he asked. "Yes, it's wonderful. You should join me." He hesitated, then nodded. He stripped to his undergarments and slipped into the pool, keeping a careful distance at first. But Sarah closed that distance, drawn to him like a moth to flame. The water came to her shoulders and she stood before him, close enough to touch. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough, "I am trying to be honorable, I know. I love that about you, but Nicholas, I am so tired of being afraid. I am so tired of holding back." She reached out and placed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. "I love you. I love you, and I want to live, truly live, not just survive. And I want to do that with you." He pulled her close then, his arms wrapping around her, and they stood together in the steaming water while the world fell away. He kissed her with more passion this time, and Sarah kissed him back with everything she had. His hands were gentle on her back, her waist, and she felt alive in a way she had never felt before. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nicholas cupped her face in his hands. "Marry me, Sarah Mitchell. Marry me here in this valley under these mountains, with only God and the eagles as our witnesses. Marry me and let me love you for whatever time we have. Let me take care of you, fight for you, build a life with you. Please, say you will marry me." "Yes," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face mixing with the hot spring water. "Yes, Nicholas Fletcher, I will marry you. I will love you and fight beside you and build a life with you, starting right now today." They stood together in the hot spring and spoke vows to each other, simple words from the heart. Nicholas promised to love her in sickness and in health, to honor her and cherish her all the days of his life. Sarah promised the same, her voice strong and clear, no trace of doubt. They had no rings, so Nicholas took a piece of rawhide from his pocket and tied it around her finger, and Sarah did the same for him. "I will get you a proper ring," he promised. "Gold with whatever stone you wish." "This is perfect," Sarah said, looking at the rawhide on her finger. "This is exactly right." They stayed in the valley for 3 more days, 3 perfect days that felt outside of time. They explored and talked, made love in the tent with a tenderness that made Sarah weep, and planned their future together. Nicholas described the cabin he wanted to build, big enough for a family, with windows facing east to catch the sunrise. Sarah talked about the garden she would plant, the books she would order from the east, the life they would make together. On the 4th morning, they packed up camp and began the ride back to Tucson. Sarah felt transformed, stronger in body and spirit than she had felt in years. The constant cough that had plagued her was almost gone, and she could breathe deeply without pain. Maybe it was the mountain air, maybe it was the hot spring, or maybe it was love. Sarah suspected it was all 3. Mrs. Delgado took one look at them when they arrived back at the boarding house and burst into happy tears. "I knew it. I knew this would happen. Oh, my dears, I am so happy for you both." She hugged Sarah tightly, then Nicholas, then Sarah again. "Tell me everything." They told her about the valley and the vows and their plans for the future, and Mrs. Delgado insisted on throwing them a proper wedding celebration. Within a week, she had organized everything. Father Miguel from the church would perform the ceremony, and half the town was invited to witness it. Sarah wrote letters back to Philadelphia, to the few friends she had left there, telling them of her miraculous recovery and her mountain man husband. She didn't know if they would believe her, didn't know if they would understand how her whole life had changed in a matter of weeks. But it didn't matter. This was her life now, and she had never been happier. The wedding was held at sunset, outside the church, with the mountains rising purple and gold in the distance. Sarah wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Delgado had sewn for her, with wildflowers in her hair that Nicholas had ridden up into the mountains to gather. He wore new clothes, clean and pressed, his beard neatly trimmed, and when she walked toward him on Mrs. Delgado's arm, the look on his face told her she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Father Miguel performed the ceremony in both English and Spanish, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Nicholas kissed Sarah with such joy that the assembled crowd cheered and whistled. They celebrated with food and music and dancing, and Sarah danced until she was breathless and laughing, held safe in her husband's strong arms. That night, in the small room at the boarding house that was now theirs together, Nicholas made love to his wife with reverence and passion. And Sarah, who had come to Arizona expecting to die alone, fell asleep in her husband's arms and dreamed of the life they would build together. The next months were a blur of activity and happiness. Nicholas began building their cabin, high in the mountains where the air was clean and clear. He chose a spot near a stream, with a view of the valley where they had pledged themselves to each other. Sarah helped where she could, and when she couldn't help physically, she planned and organized and made their temporary camp a home. Her health continued to improve. The cough disappeared completely, and she gained weight, her face losing that hollow, haunted look. When they went back to Tucson for supplies, people marveled at the transformation. The dying Eastern girl had become a vibrant mountain woman, strong and capable and radiantly happy. "It is a miracle," Father Miguel said, shaking his head in wonder. "I have seen many things in my years, but this is truly a miracle." "Love is the miracle," Sarah said, watching Nicholas load supplies onto their pack horse. "Love and this beautiful, harsh land and the grace of God." By the time winter came, the cabin was finished. It was everything Nicholas had promised, solid and warm, with windows facing east and a large stone fireplace. Sarah had her garden plot planned for spring, and Nicholas had built her shelves for the books she was slowly collecting. They spent the winter snowed in together, and Sarah had never known such contentment. In the spring, she realized she was pregnant. The news filled Nicholas with both joy and terror. He remembered too well losing Anna and their son, and the thought of going through that again nearly paralyzed him. But Sarah was strong now, healthy in a way she hadn't been in years, and the midwife Mrs. Delgado brought to examine her declared her fit and well. "This baby is strong," the midwife said. "I can feel it. And you are strong too, Senora Fletcher. You will do well, I think." The pregnancy was easy, easier than Sarah had any right to expect. She bloomed with it, growing round and rosy, full of energy and plans. Nicholas hovered over her like a worried bear, but she just laughed and kissed him and told him everything would be fine. "We are meant to have this child," she said, placing his hand on her swollen belly so he could feel the baby kick. "Just like we were meant to find each other. Have faith, my love." On a warm day in late October, their son was born. The labor was long but not dangerous, and when Sarah finally pushed him into the world, Nicholas was there to catch him, tears streaming down his face. The baby was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked magnificently. "What shall we name him?" Sarah asked, exhausted but glowing, holding their son against her chest. "Samuel," Nicholas said without hesitation, "after my father, if that pleases you. Samuel Fletcher, it's perfect." They had 2 more children in the years that followed. A daughter named Anna, for Nicholas's first wife, who Sarah insisted deserved to be honored and remembered. And then another son, Michael, who was the image of his mother with his light hair and gray eyes. The cabin grew to accommodate their expanding family, and the garden flourished. Sarah's library filled shelf after shelf, books ordered from the East and treasured like gold. Nicholas continued to hunt and trap, but now he had a family to come home to, children who shrieked with joy when they saw him riding up the trail. They faced challenges, of course. There were hard winters when supplies ran low, summers when drought threatened the garden, illnesses and injuries, and all the normal struggles of frontier life. The Apache situation grew more tense as the army pushed harder, and there were times when Nicholas had to use his relationships with the Apache leaders to keep his family safe. But through it all, they had each other, and that was enough. Sarah's consumption never returned. Whether it had truly been healed or had simply gone into permanent remission, no one could say. She chose to believe it was healed, that the combination of mountain air and love and purpose had cured what Philadelphia doctors had said was incurable. Nicholas just thanked God every day for the miracle of her, this woman who had been dying and was now so vibrantly alive. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they rode back to the Valley of Wildflowers, leaving the children with Mrs. Delgado for a few days. They camped in the same spot where Nicholas had first proposed and renewed their vows under the stars. "I thought I would die alone," Sarah said, holding her husband's hands. "I thought I had nothing left to live for. And then you saved me from that snake and from myself and from the consumption that was eating me alive. You gave me a life, Nicholas. You gave me everything." "You saved me too," Nicholas said. "I was dead inside, just going through the motions of living. You brought me back to life, gave me a reason to feel again, to hope again. You gave me a family and a home and a future. You are everything I never dared to hope for." They made love under the stars that night, with the same passion and tenderness they had shared from the beginning. And in the morning, they picked wildflowers to bring back to their children, pieces of the place where their love story had truly begun. The years rolled on, bringing both joy and sorrow. Mrs. Delgado passed away peacefully in her sleep, and Sarah mourned her like the mother she had been. Nicholas's skills as a scout made him valuable as the territory moved toward statehood, and he often consulted with officials on Apache matters, always advocating for peace and understanding. The children grew strong and capable, Samuel becoming a skilled hunter like his father, Anna developing her mother's love of books and learning, and Michael showing a gift with horses that amazed everyone. When Samuel was 18, he fell in love with the daughter of an Apache family that Nicholas had befriended years before. The wedding united the two families in a way that felt right and good, a bridge between cultures in a land too often divided. Sarah wept happy tears as she watched her son marry, remembering the dying woman she had once been and marveling at all that had grown from that desperate trip to Arizona. Anna went east to school, determined to become a teacher, and returned to start a school in Tucson for children of all backgrounds. Michael married a rancher's daughter and started breeding horses, building on the skills his father had taught him. Sarah and Nicholas grew old together in their mountain cabin, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering like the rocks around them. They watched their children have children, and then those children have children, and the family they had created spread across the territory like wildflowers. On a spring morning when Sarah was 68 years old, she and Nicholas took their usual walk to the stream. She was slower now, her joints stiff with age, but she could still breathe deeply of the mountain air, still feel the sun on her face and the strength in her husband's arm as he helped her over the rough spots. They sat on their favorite rock, the one where they had sat so many times over the years, and watched the water flow past. "Do you remember when you thought you were dying?" Nicholas asked, his voice still deep but roughened with age. "I was dying," Sarah said. "The doctors were right about that." But I didn't die, did I? I lived. I loved. I had a family and a home and a life beyond anything I could have imagined. We did that together, Nicholas said, taking her hand in his. His hands were gnarled now, twisted with arthritis, but to Sarah they were still the most beautiful hands in the world. Everything we built together. And we will die together too when the time comes, Sarah said, old and full of years, surrounded by the people we love. That's more than I ever dreamed possible when I was that scared girl on the stagecoach, coming to Tucson to die alone. You never had to die alone, Nicholas said. I made sure of that. I made sure you lived loved instead. You did, Sarah agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. You kept that promise every single day. They sat together in the sunshine, two old people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a love that had lasted decades. The mountain stood eternal around them, witness to their story, guardian of their happiness. And when they finally did pass, years later, within months of each other, they left behind a legacy of love that lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The cabin still stood in the mountains, maintained by the family as a memorial and a reminder. The Valley of Wildflowers still bloomed every spring. And the story of Sarah and Nicholas, of the dying woman and the mountain man who saved her, was told and retold around fires and dinner tables, a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, to create life where there had been only death. Sarah had thought she would die alone, but Nicholas Fletcher had made sure she lived loved, and in doing so had saved them both. Their love had been the miracle they both needed, and it had been enough, more than enough. It had been everything.